I'm surrounded by theists. I need to cross over to the other side. How does an atheist argue about God? Walter Sinnott Armstrong, professor of philosophy and legal studies at Dartmouth, does not believe in God.
Walter, I, like many people, would love to know whether God exists. If I were beginning to think about this question and I came to you as a philosopher or as a mentor, how would you advise me to even begin to think about this subject?
Well, I think you should think about it in the same way that you think about similar questions in other areas. If you want to know whether something exists, you engage in a certain type of inquiry. If you want to know whether a certain animal exists, you go and try to take pictures of it. If you want to know whether ghosts exist, you would engage in certain types of explorations. You would talk to people who say they experience ghosts and see whether their stories are coherent. Look at the circumstances under which they claim to experience ghosts and ask yourself, are those circumstances under which people's beliefs are reliable or unreliable? It seems to me that you should approach the question of the existence of God in the same way that you approach all these other questions of the existence of other types of creatures or entities.
My initial reaction is that's exactly what I would not do. And here's why. Because as I define God, and it's not necessarily in an Abrahamic Western tradition, but in the broadest sense, by the very definition, it is therefore different than everything else I know. It's different than all the abstract mathematics. It's different than the quantum physics. It is a potential cause of everything that exists. And so by that characteristic, I think that I can't use the same kinds of inquiry that I would use for everything else. That's my problem.
Well, then what kind of inquiry are you going to use?
That's why I'm coming to you.
If you don't use your senses and you don't use the testimony of other people, then you can try to use arguments a priori, as they say, prior to experience, like mathematical arguments, and see whether those work, because you want to know whether whether imaginary numbers really exist or something of that sort. You need some kind of evidence. If you don't have anything of that sort, you ought to at least suspend belief and probably deny that the thing exists if you think that there should be some reason if it did exist, right?
That may be the conclusion that we ultimately come to, and I certainly do not want to believe in God based on fallacious arguments. I mean, that's something that scares me because I know I'd like to do it, and I absolutely want to avoid fooling myself.
Well, then let me give you some advice. People are not good at finding the fallacies in their own arguments. If you want to know whether your arguments have fallacies in them, you should talk to other people. And you should listen to other people when they point out what they think are the problems in your arguments.
Yeah, okay. I sometimes feel that I like all of the arguments on the critical side, that is arguments for the non-existence of God, except at the end of the day, I feel that I still have a feeling that God exists, even though I sort of agree with all the arguments against it. Is that irrational?
Now we're back to ghosts. You've got all these arguments against ghosts. You've got no good reason for ghosts.
But I don't believe in ghosts.
Okay, but
if I do potentially believe in God.
If your sister, I don't know if you have a sister, but if your sister came to you and said, I feel that there's a ghost in my attic. I have no reason to believe in this ghost. I have lots of reasons to deny the existence of this ghost, but I feel that there's a ghost in my attic. You wouldn't think that she was holding that belief in a rational way or that she should hold that belief.
No, I wouldn't.
Right. You'd feel sorry for her. And that's the way atheists, I think, often view people who believe in God. They have this feeling, they've just got no reason.
I think Walter feels sorry for me. I don't mind, but I'm still not convinced that arguments about God are like arguments about anything else. I need Alvin Plantinga, one of the most distinguished philosophers of the Christian religion. If anyone understands arguments about God, It's Al. We meet at Notre Dame.
Alvin, you have famously rejected the need of argument to deal with the existence of God. Yet, at the same time, you've joined in the fray by throwing up lots of different possible arguments for the existence of God. What are some of them?
And first of all, I do really think one doesn't need arguments in order to be perfectly rational, reasonable, sensible, justified, up-to-date, okay intellectually in believing in God. But there still could be lots of arguments for the existence of God. Let me just give you an example of a kind of a peculiar argument along these lines, say the set of the natural numbers, or some very sort of diverse set of elements from the set of real numbers. No human being could think all those things together, have them before their minds at one time. So if sets really are collections and have to be collected in that fashion, there would have to be some supermind, something like God, in order to collect them.
What about epistemological kinds of arguments?
So think about what knowledge is. I would say we could use the term warrant to denote whatever it is that when you add it to true belief, the result is knowledge. A belief has warrant for me provided it's produced by cognitive faculties, memory, perception, induction, and the like, that are functioning properly, not subject to any dysfunction or malfunction, in the sort of environment for which they were designed by God or evolution, and according to a design plan that's successfully aimed at truth. But what I'm interested in here just is the notion of proper function. I think proper function is essential to the idea of warrant. And I think proper function can't be explained in naturalistic terms. People have tried to give an explanation in terms of evolution, for example, so that you're functioning properly when you're functioning in a way which was adaptive for your ancestors or something. Well, I don't have the time here to explain why none of this works, but none of it works. The basic idea of proper function is that of something which is designed to work a certain way, and then it functions properly when it works that way. And as it seems to me, you can't give an explanation of proper function in naturalistic terms. You can only do it in terms of a creator or designer of human beings.
How about some interesting arguments you've used that talks about flavors and colors, the Mozart argument, some of the richness of our world? Do you think those are really demonstrations of God's existence?
I think it'd be much too strong to say that they are demonstrations, but the fact that there are people like Mozart that can create beauty of absolutely stunning proportions, this seems to me to fit in much better in a theistic universe, in one which God is in control, God who is himself beautiful beyond compare, who appreciates beauty, who makes us able also to appreciate it, makes us able also to make beautiful things and the like. That fits in vastly better, our being like that, than say our being in a naturalistic universe where we just happen to come out this way because evolution crafted us in this fashion. I mean, from that point of view, it's hard to think that either morality or beauty are real, that there really is such a thing as morality, or that there really is such a thing as what's genuinely beautiful. But from a theistic perspective, all that makes perfect sense.